At the Mid-Autumn Business Banquet, my brother's scholarship student secretly cut off a piece of the custom mooncake I was about to share with everyone. This mooncake was custom-made at great expense. Not only does it symbolize the auspicious meaning of blooming flowers and a full moon, but it also represents the sincerity between us and our investors. Now that a large piece is missing, it would be impolite to cut and share the rest with others. This is my first business collaboration, and it is extremely important to me. She suddenly knelt before me with a thud in front of everyone. I just wanted to take it back and share a bite with my family. They've suffered their whole lives and have never tasted anything so sweet. She suddenly reached out and grabbed my fishtail skirt, and with a rustle, my body was exposed in front of everyone. In an instant, I became a laughingstock in the business world. So I cut off all her funding. When my brother found out, he accused me of not understanding the hardships of the common people and said he would make me experience the bitterness of growing up poor. In the bitter cold of winter, they threw me into the deep mountains, starving and freezing. I died on New Year's Eve, yet the impoverished student was mistaken for the daughter of a wealthy family and was pampered like a princess. As I sank into darkness with resentment, I opened my eyes again and found myself back on the day the impoverished student secretly cut the mooncake. When I opened my eyes, I still seemed to feel the chill on my body and couldn't help but shiver. The cold and hunger still seemed to cling to my body. "Are you all right, young Master Gu?" I froze for a moment, then looked at the familiar mermaid dress I was wearing in the mirror. I suddenly realized I had been reborn. Young Master Gu's proposal is quite good. Our L group will give it careful consideration. The person in charge had a thoughtful look in his eyes, and I knew he was weighing the options. Familiar words reached my ears, and I couldn't help but fall into a daze. The butler coughed quietly beside me. "Miss, the mooncakes have been prepared and can be cut soon. No need to cut them," I whispered to the butler. A flicker of shock passed through the old butler's eyes. As I looked at the lively scene before me, a trace of complexity flashed in my gaze. All the misfortunes in my life originated from that one mooncake, which Chen Mengyao had cut into such a broken mess. In my previous life, the business negotiation between Gu Corporation and L Group coincided with the Mid-Autumn Festival. To make a good start at this business dinner, I spent $88 million to create an exorbitantly priced mooncake. This mooncake was like a piece of art. I specifically called in a favor to have the patterns on the crust painted by the contemporary master of traditional Chinese painting, Elder Lin. At the end of the business banquet, it was time to share this symbol of perfect reunion with everyone. I believed this was the most perfect business banquet, but the moment the mooncake was presented, a large piece had been cut out of that perfect mooncake. The lifelike full moon on the crust and the elegant celestial maiden beneath it were utterly ruined, and the filling inside the mooncake had been scooped out and scattered everywhere, making the scene a complete disaster. I was furious and turned to look at Chen Mengyao, who had filling smeared around her mouth. She was a financially struggling student sponsored by my brother and had been brought to the banquet as part of the Gu family's charity promotion. My face immediately turned cold, and she nervously pulled out the broken pieces of the mooncake from her bag, wrapped in a plastic bag. "I'm sorry, I've never seen such beautiful mooncakes before. Today is Mid-Autumn Festival, and I want to bring one back for my sick mother to taste the sweetness too." She was crying pitifully, her face streaked with tears. My brother, Gusu, walked up to me with a grim expression and slapped me without saying a word. "It's just a mooncake. If you want to eat one, I'll buy you 20. Yao Yao was just being filial. "That's different. I specifically hired a master of traditional Chinese painting to create this auspicious symbol for my first business collaboration. What kind of lousy artwork is this? It's just a mooncake. I think you're just too accustomed to luxury. Such an embarrassment. Is this how you conduct business negotiations?" I was completely stunned by my brother's beating, but when I looked up, I saw the smile in Chen Mingyao's eyes. I was so furious that I was shouting about cutting off her funding, but then she slid to her knees in front of me and grabbed the hem of my skirt. With the force of her pull, the skirt tore with a loud rip and fell to the ground. The reporters who had been invited to cover Mr. Lin's work didn't miss such explosive news, and in no time, my scandalous photos were splashed across all kinds of headlines. My first business partnership was completely ruined, and I became a laughingstock in the upper circles. The collaboration with L Group was completely hopeless. Not only that, but my fiancé, Shen Tinqua, also broke off our engagement. Devastated, I shut myself at home, drowning my sorrows in alcohol. Over time, my figure gradually deteriorated. In order to better take care of Chen Mengyao, Gusu simply brought her to his home and provided her with every possible care. Under Gusu's doting, Chen Mengyao began to regard this place as her own home. Without my permission, she casually wore my clothes as if they were her own. I couldn't stand it and relentlessly targeted Chen Mengyao, but she endured my scolding and hitting without uttering a word. Gusu desperately protected her. "Anyway, those clothes don't fit you anymore. You stay at home all day and never go out, so it's a waste to just leave them lying around. It's better to let Yao Yao wear them." Yao Yao looks much better in them than you do. Gusu looked at my out-of-shape figure with a face full of disdain. Under Gusu's doting care, Chen Mengyao was becoming more and more like a wealthy young lady. Later, Gusu even took her in as his younger sister and raised her in the Gu family. On the second Mid-Autumn Festival under the moonlight, my former fiancé confessed his love to her with her favorite white roses. I could no longer bear it, but my mother, who loved me the most, had tragically fallen off a cliff while traveling abroad 3 years ago, and my father's flight crashed on his way back to the country. After my parents passed away, Gusu completely took over the Gu Corporation and became its helmsman. I have no way to deal with Chen Mengyao. While Gusu was abroad, Chen Mengyao staged a kidnapping and framed me for it. Under Chen Mengyao's scheme of feigning injury to win sympathy, Gusu was completely enraged. She's just a poor child who has had a hard time getting to where she is. Gui, you've lived such a comfortable life that you simply don't understand the hardships of ordinary people. You don't even value human lives anymore, is that it? Gusu abandoned me in the deep mountains during the coldest days of winter, where I died in despair, forever sleeping in the darkness, and after my death, Chen Mengyao stepped on everything I had, transforming into the princess of the Gu family. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back at the Mid-Autumn Festival business banquet. As the mutilated mooncakes were brought out, a cold glint flashed in my eyes. The crowd looked at the haphazardly cut mooncakes, and whispers filled the venue. I couldn't help but glance at the pitiful Chen Mengyao beside me. She stubbornly pressed her lips together, tears glistening in her eyes. Did you make these? I asked her with a faint, ambiguous smile. She suddenly wiped her tears. Miss Gu, I didn't mean to. I've never smelled such fragrant mooncakes before. I just wanted to bring some back for my mother. Today happens to be the Mid-Autumn Festival. But my mother is still lying at home sick. I looked at her, a trace of mockery flashing in my eyes. The little girl is just showing her filial piety. Let it be. Whether we eat the mooncake or not doesn't really matter anyway. The poor girl is quite pitiful. Yes, it's just a mooncake after all. I looked into her eyes with a hint of a smile. Do you know the value of this mooncake? It not only carries the Mid-Autumn Festival wishes of everyone present, but also symbolizes a perfect union and lasting happiness. Also, who told you this mooncake was meant to be eaten? I raised an eyebrow at her. If it's not for eating, then is it meant to be offered as a tribute? A mooncake selling for 10 million? That Gu family girl must be out of her mind. Who would dare to collaborate with her? Even if you have money, you shouldn't spend it like that. I estimated the time, and the person the butler contacted should have arrived by now. Sure enough, amidst the crowd's murmurs, an old man rushed in energetically from outside. Girl, you've finally come to your senses. How can you eat this artwork? I'll take it back right away for preservation treatment. This mooncake is worth tens of millions, so handle it with care. What? This mooncake is actually worth over 10 million. Someone present couldn't help but exclaim, their gaze complex as they looked at the old man before them. They knew this old man. He was the famous collector from City A, Old Lu. The items he appraised had never been wrong in their value. This mooncake features a painting by Old Lin. Old Lu explained to the people around him. Everyone couldn't help but gasp. They had heard of Old Lin, a highly distinctive painter. It's perfectly normal for his works to be worth millions. He always follows his whims, making his paintings exceptionally rare and hard to come by. Who would have thought that this mooncake had such an impressive background? This Gu family girl is truly remarkable. I smiled slightly. Old Lin once owed my mother a favor. In my previous life, I used this favor to gain the spotlight in this business collaboration. Yatu, as agreed, I will donate these 10 million to charity after the banquet to support children who excel in both character and academics. Everyone present couldn't help but gasp. It turned out this mooncake was meant for charity. The way they looked at me couldn't help but carry a hint of apology. Old Lu, you're too late. This mooncake has already been eaten. In my previous life, I spent extravagantly to maintain the Gu family's reputation. I wanted to cut the mooncake painted by Elder Lin to share with everyone, so much so that even when Elder Lin's die-hard fan offered to buy it from me for 10 million, I didn't agree. But in this life, I changed my mind. Elder Lu looked at the destroyed mooncake and couldn't help but feel a flash of anger in his eyes. Who did this? I looked at Chen Mengyao, who was sobbing beside me, with a half smile and a hint of mockery in my eyes. In my previous life, I had insisted on cutting this mooncake to show off, only to end up offending this Elder Lu. This Elder Lu is not just an avid fan, he also has countless connections with the chairman of L Group. This time, it wasn't me who offended Elder Lu. Moreover, Elder Lu was even angrier than in the previous life. Enough, isn't it just a mooncake? Gusu walked towards me, his eyes filled with strong reproach. I gave him a helpless look, but I've already promised to sell this mooncake to Mr. Lu. The impoverished children in the mountainous areas are still waiting for the 10 million donation in Mr. Lu's name, brother. Although Sister Mingyao's intentions are filial, still, I'm sorry. Mr. Lu, do you think it's possible? Gusu, who was standing nearby, abruptly interrupted me, trying to speak up for Chen Mengyao, but he fell silent after Mr. Lu gave him a calm glance. I walked over to the champagne tower, took a glass of champagne, and offered an apology to Mr. Lu. I looked at Chen Mengyao, her eyes brimming with tears, and declared with a sense of righteousness, "You are a financially disadvantaged student sponsored by our Gu family. Because of your greed. Do you know how many other unfortunate children like you have lost their shelter? You got caught in the rain, so you want to tear up their umbrellas. Today happens to be the Mid-Autumn Festival. This mooncake is not only for donations to the impoverished children but also carries a wish for a beautiful and harmonious reunion. I'm sorry, I didn't know." Her face turned pale, and suddenly there was a heavy thud as she fell to the ground. Of course, I knew what she was trying to do. So I deliberately stepped away from the champagne tower. This time, Chen Mengyao didn't manage to grab my skirt, and the entire table of champagne ended up drenching her. I suppressed the smile at the corner of my lips. This time, it wasn't me making a fool of myself. Enough, I'll pay the 10 million. Facing the pointing and whispering of the crowd, Gusu couldn't help but step forward. "Thank you, brother, for this kindness towards the children in the impoverished mountainous areas," I smiled, my eyes curving like crescent moons. Gusu's involuntary spending to support me was truly satisfying. Gusu spent the money, I gained the face, I stole the spotlight, and in the end, Chen Mingyao's reputation was ruined. Everyone here is an entrepreneur. If Chen Mengyao can find a job after graduation, I'll admit defeat. Looking at Chen Mengyao, who was drenched like a drowned rat, I said understandingly, "Take the mooncakes back with you. You and your mother can enjoy them slowly." A flicker of amusement crossed my eyes. Chen Mingyao's mother had long passed away, and hearing this, her face turned a few shades paler. The person in charge of L Group looked at me with appreciation in their eyes. "Miss Gu's proposal is truly brilliant. I believe our boss would be very willing to collaborate with Miss Gu." I looked at the small red dot in his tie pin and nodded noncommittally. Watching Chen Mengyao being led away in a fluster by Gusu, a shadow of darkness flickered in my eyes. When I returned to school, Chen Mengyao was sharing mooncakes with everyone. "These are mooncakes from HG. I earned them through my part-time job. Everyone, please try them." I couldn't help but feel a bit curious and looked over. It turned out to be the mooncakes from the evening banquet. Shin Tianlin walked in and couldn't help but be startled by the scene before her. "Chen Mengyao, aren't these expired mooncakes? Why are you still handing them out?" Everyone's expressions turned somewhat unpleasant. Shin Tiantian immediately stepped in front of Chen Mengyao, shielding her. "What are you messing around with?" He looked at Shin Tianlin and me, his expression extremely unpleasant. I looked at my fiancé, a trace of mockery sketched in the depths of my eyes. On the very first day Chen Mengyao entered the school, she caught the attention of that playboy Shin Tianqua. Her resilience, like that of a blade of grass, touched his heart. "Gui, you and my sister are like delicate flowers in a greenhouse, completely unaware of the hardships others endure." I was somewhat speechless and ignored this nonsense, simply instructing the driver and butler behind me to distribute the mooncakes to the classmates in the class. These mooncakes are from the same shop, but they stand out for being fresh. Some busybody in the class had already opened the packaging. Indeed, they smell fragrant and sweet. Chen Mingyao's mooncakes even had a slightly sour scent. Chen Mengyao could no longer stay and ran out in sorrow. Shin Tianqua chased after her. To cheer her up, he ate all the mooncakes Chen Mengyao had given him. However, this delicate soul didn't even make it into the classroom before being carried out of the school by an ambulance due to stomach discomfort. Shin Tianlin and I watched as Shin Tianqua was carried away, exchanging a knowing smile. In my previous life, Shin Tianlin and I did not get along well. She was cunning and calculating within the Shin family, and she had little affection for her brother, Shin Tianqua. I dislike people who are driven by self-interest, but now I realize how mistaken I was in my previous life. In wealthy circles, interests always come first. Don't worry, someone that foolish could never become my sister-in-law. Shin Tianlin smiled as she looked at me. I nodded. In wealthy circles, love isn't a necessity. Come to think of it, my engagement date with Shin Tianqua is approaching soon. On the day of the engagement banquet, Chen Mengyao walked into the banquet hall arm in arm with my brother, smiling as if they were the real siblings. She wore my evening gown on stage, her eyes brimming with pride. After Gusu paid 10 million for her, she moved into my house as if it were her right, declaring she would work to repay the debt. Watching Gusu's doting on her, I couldn't help but mock. This wasn't hiring a maid, it was practically inviting a princess. But Chen Mengyao was never born to be a princess. She simply couldn't fill out my evening gown. It looked loose and empty on her. Gusu is really stingy. He didn't even buy Chen Mengyao an evening gown. Well, that makes sense. After all, he just spent 10 million on me, so naturally he'd want to get some advantage back. The other girls looked at her with a hint of disdain in their circle. Evening gowns are always custom-made and one of a kind. It couldn't possibly be unsuitable, unless it's not your own. They all had some idea about what happened at the business banquet. Chen Mengyao looked at Gusu with a hint of grievance on her face. You're so sneaky. I walked up to her, looking at her with a grin. Gui, that's enough. All right. These clothes belong to Sister Yao, and so does the jewelry. This jade bracelet really complements your skin tone, sister. This jade bracelet was something I specifically placed in the dressing room for Chen Mengyao. Upon hearing my words, Mrs. Shen turned her gaze this way, and when she looked at Chen Mengyao's hand, her smile instantly froze on her face. This jade bracelet was given to me by Mrs. Shen. It was a gift for her future daughter-in-law. The marriage between the Gu and Shen families had been arranged since childhood. The girls whispered among themselves, and for a moment, all sorts of gazes fell upon Chen Mengyao. Chen Mengyao is like a rat in the gutter, exposed before everyone. Mrs. Shen's face turned pale, and she looked at Chen Mengyao with strong dislike, but Shen Tianque quickly ran to Chen Mengyao's side, shielding her, and said, Mom, this is the Yao I told you about. Her grades are excellent, and she's a good person. Mrs. Shen nodded, but her expression was somewhat gloomy. Brother, your companion is don't stand in the wrong place. Shen Tianlin kindly reminded, today, you two are the main characters. However, Chen Mengyao's face showed a hint of hurt, and Shen Tianque certainly didn't want his girl to feel wronged. It seems he had made up his mind. Mom, Yao is my girlfriend. She is the girl I want to marry. Nonsense. A flash of anger crossed Mrs. Shen's face. No matter what, I will marry Yao. Shen Tianque grabbed Chen Mengyao's hand and walked away, ignoring everyone. Unfortunately, as I was leaving, I stepped on Chen Mengyao's dress. With a tearing sound, her skirt was pulled down to her waist, her snow-white skin was exposed to everyone, and many ill-intentioned young men in the crowd stared with wide eyes. Shen Tianque's face turned pale. He took off his suit jacket, wrapped it around Chen Mengyao, and held her in his arms. Everyone looked at me with pity. In my past life, I would have already lost my composure, crying and demanding that Mrs. Shen give me an explanation, but in this life, love means nothing in my eyes. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation. However, Gusu walked up to Mrs. Shen and said, Aunt Shen, I have a suggestion. He looked at me with coldness in his eyes. Yao is the child my father adopted before he passed away. Since Tianque and Yao are in love with each other, why don't our Shen and Gu families join together in this wonderful match? This, Mrs. Shen hesitated. The current head of the Gu family was Gusu, and her original intention was to climb the social ladder by aligning with the Gu family. A forced melon is not sweet. After hesitating for a long time, Mrs. Shen made her choice. Mrs. Shen, today is my engagement banquet. You know perfectly well that the person engaged to Shen Tianque is me. I looked at her, a trace of coldness flashing in my eyes. Gui, the Gu family raised you. Everything I've done has been for the benefit of the Gu family. If you keep causing trouble like this, get out of the Gu family. Gusu's voice turned cold as he threatened me from the side. It seems you've grown too accustomed to a comfortable life. You should go experience the hardships at the bottom like Yao. Looking at my brother, whom I have respected from the bottom of my heart all these years, a bitter smile flickered in my eyes. After so many years of being together, it turns out that in his eyes, I still can't compare to that impoverished younger sister. He still wants to push me into the abyss of tragedy, just like in the previous life. Before I could even speak, a cold voice abruptly rang out from the crowd. Gusu, the one who should get lost is you, Mom. Gusu couldn't help but mutter. What's going on? How are you still alive? My mother walked up to me with a smile in her eyes, sympathetically taking my hand. Of course I have to live, otherwise, I'd just let you two illegitimate siblings take over and bully my daughter. Your father tried to kill me by pushing me off a cliff, but unfortunately, he died in a plane crash on his way back. Heaven couldn't stand his evil deeds, so it took him away and brought me back. In his previous life, Gusu hastily went abroad before taking over the company. It was at this time that Chen Mengyao orchestrated a kidnapping for herself. Chen Mengyao nearly got herself into serious trouble, all because Gusu was delayed by urgent matters he had to handle overseas. This led to Gusu venting his anger on me. Gusu's unusual behavior made me very concerned, so I decided to investigate his past life traces ahead of time. Only then did I find out that my mother hadn't actually died. She had been hidden away by an admirer from her youth. However, she had been in a coma all along. For some unknown reason, she woke up in this lifetime. Looking at the man behind my mother, a complex emotion flashed in my eyes. Chairman Lin, long time no see. He looked at me, a hint of admiration in his eyes, as expected of Alan's daughter. I'm very confident in trusting L Group's project to you. I don't know what Gusu did in my previous life. I only know that after he returned, L Group suddenly fell into chaos. Only now do I realize that Gusu carries more than just my life on his shoulders. He also carries the lives of my mother and Uncle Lin. It wasn't until after I died that I learned Gusu was never actually my mother's child. If your father hadn't brought you into our Gu family back then, and if you hadn't taken good care of Yi, do you really think you'd have reached the position you're in today? Don't forget, the Gu and Gu Corporation is not your Gusu's Gu. Take your biological sister and get out of here, you pair of illegitimate siblings. Don't think I don't know about the despicable things your father did back then. Mom, you better not regret this. With a useless person like Gui, do you really think she can hold up the Gu Corporation? Aren't you afraid she'll bankrupt the Gu Corporation and leave you with nothing? When that happens, don't come blaming me for your lack of support in old age. A cold glint flashed in Gusu's eyes. Yo-yo, come with me, Aunt Gu. I absolutely will not marry a spoiled, arrogant young lady like Gui who bullies others by flaunting her power. Shintianko looked at my mother, tossed out that sentence, and then hurried off in the direction Chen Mengyao and Gusu had gone. My mother looked at Mrs. Shin with a faint, ambiguous smile, while Mrs. Shin wore an expression as if she had swallowed something bitter. Madam Gu, children's squabbles shouldn't be taken seriously. Madam Shin, even the bracelet meant for the future mistress of the Shin family has been taken by that girl. I believe you also agree that forced affection never yields sweetness. Fortunately, Ari isn't the type to be unreasonable. In the end, they simply weren't meant to be. My mother smiled, cutting off whatever Madame Shin was about to say. I blinked at Shin Tianlin and saw the shared amusement in each other's eyes. We understood without saying a word. If Gusu and Shin Tianko wanted to follow Chen Mengyao in enduring hardship, then in the future, endless hardships would await them. In this elite social circle, one's value isn't just innate, it can also be accumulated through later efforts. People strive for higher ground, just as water flows downhill. Since Gusu and Shintianko want to step into the mud, Shintianlin and I might as well give them a push. The first thing Gusu did after leaving the Gu family was to take his core team with him. The second thing he did was to flamboyantly establish his own Sumain group. Sitting in the living room, I looked at the documents in my hand and couldn't help but smile, my eyes curving with delight. Continue dreaming. Keep on with his pipe dream. Mom looked at me dotingly. Look at you. Not sitting properly, not ladylike at all. I playfully stuck my tongue out at Mom. I'm not a lady. Mom is the graceful lady. I winked at her and glanced toward Uncle Lin over there. Uncle Lin turned his head away and coughed unnaturally a couple of times. A flicker of amusement passed through my eyes. In my previous life, Uncle Lin had intended to mentor me, and I knew that both Old Man Lin and the L Group were resources he had provided to support me. But I played this good hand of cards terribly. Uncle Lin had no choice but to step back to protect himself. That's my own incompetence, and I don't blame anyone. In this lifetime, I will stand at the very top and drive those rats back into the sewers. Has Gusu taken all the core talent from the Gu Corporation? What do you plan to do? Uncle Lin looked at me, a flicker of interest in his eyes. That business banquet was a test for this little girl. I originally thought she was just a flashy but useless embroidered pillow. He dislikes foolish children, and he detests those who are both foolish and wicked even more. Initially, I only planned to help this child 3 times. Old Lin helped once, and the mid-autumn banquet was the second time. One more time, and I was prepared to let this child fend for herself. No wonder he is cruel. If she weren't Alan's child, he wouldn't have helped her even once. Now it seems this child is quite interesting. From her clever counterattack at the mid-autumn banquet to following the clues to find Alan, she has a thoughtful mind. Of course, I understood Uncle Lin's meaning. I smiled at him and said, talented individuals are common. With 3 talent spotters here, isn't that enough? Having lived an extra life, I naturally know which areas are worth investing in once Gusu comes into power, compared to the trial and error of Gusu's previous life. In this life I can strike with precision. As for talent, after this period of learning, along with my mother and Uncle Lin's guidance, what more do I have to worry about? The funds left to me by the Gu family are more than enough to cultivate talent. Besides, there's still Uncle Lin. If he wants to pursue my mother, shouldn't he offer some benefits? With enough food, one naturally gains strength. What this society lacks is not talent, but the resources to nurture talent. Without the Gu family, Gusu's budget for trial and error in his investment journey has significantly decreased. Without connections, the cost of his mistakes has correspondingly increased, and with my mother and Uncle Lin by my side, I naturally ride the wind and rise. I'm glad you have the drive to work hard, but you both need to take care of your health as well. My mother sighed and looked reproachfully at Uncle Lin beside her. Uncle Lin awkwardly rubbed his nose, admitting that he wanted to find a successor for the L group. Moreover, this kid is mature and steady. At first, he only did it for Lin's sake, but now he genuinely wants to mentor this child. This way, not only can I have a private world with Lin, but I can also earn her favor. Isn't that wonderful? My mother shook her head helplessly and placed 2 cups of hot milk in front of us. In the real estate sector, the Shen family is the best choice, but Gusu has tied Shen Tianque down using Chen Mengyao. Given how deeply Shen cares for his son, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to cooperate with the Shen family. Uncle Lin looked at me, a hint of meaning flashing in his eyes. What if we turn Shen Tianque into a useless pawn? The Shen family has more than just Shen Tianque as their child. I lifted my gaze to Uncle Lin, my eyes dark and unreadable. He was taken aback for a moment, then burst into hearty laughter. You're quite the girl, showing the same spirit I had in my youth. I raised my glass of warm milk and clinked it with his, smiling. Shen Tianque and Chen Mingyao's love was severely obstructed by Mrs. Shen. Mom, when marrying a wife, one should choose virtue. Water flows downward. After all, brother is just seeking novelty, trying some wild herbs and porridge, but such things without nutrition won't be consumed for long. We should vary his diet a bit more. There are plenty of good girls who want to marry your brother, in our social circle. You need some strategies to come out on top. In the future, your brother will need a supportive partner, not some poor woman who only knows how to play the victim. Mrs. Shen nodded and began actively arranging blind dates for Shen Tianque. Under Shen Tianlin's meddling, she successfully caused a rift between Shen Tianque and Mrs. Shen. He even declared in front of these young ladies from prominent families that he would marry no one but Chen Mengyao. This infuriated Mrs. Shen so much that she suffered a stroke and fainted. To take care of his wife, Mr. Shen handed over the company to Shen Tianlin to manage. At the evening banquet, I clinked glasses with Shen Tianlin and said with a smile, the thorn in our side has finally been removed. She took a sip of red wine and smiled at me. Likewise, the atmosphere at tonight's auction was particularly lively. When Gusu, Chen Mengyao, and the third person walked in, I raised an eyebrow. Chen Mingyao's outfit was anything but plain. Perhaps Mrs. Shen's disdain for her had stunned her, as she was dressed in such a dazzling array of jewelry that she resembled a Christmas tree. I covered my mouth, thinking that jewelry has always been valued for its quality, not its quantity. For example, the laurel tear necklace worn by the French queen that Shen Tianlin had around her neck, or my pair of green jade earrings. These were all luxury items auctioned off. And being one of a kind is what truly makes a statement. Sometimes, jewelry is like people, it needs a reputation and value, and the suit Gusu is wearing is still last year's style, while Shen Tianque is even worse off, with his clothes all wrinkled and a sorry sight to behold. I heard that CEO Shen cut off his living expenses in a fit of anger. It seems Gusu didn't give his brother-in-law any benefits. Clothes make the man, and without his halo, Shen Tianque is nothing special. I really don't know how I fell for him in my past life, being so devoted and jealous over him. Sitting elegantly in a corner of the auction hall, Shen Tianlin and I watched Chen Mengyao and the other two over there. Our target this time was very clear, the plot of land in the western suburbs. Gusu's eyes held a look of absolute determination. Shen Tianlin and I exchanged a smile, then both began raising our bids. Brother Su, I'll give you all my savings, you must beat these 2 bitches. Shen Tianque looked at Shen Tianlin, a trace of hatred flashing in his eyes. It didn't stop until Gusu and Shen Tianque's assets were combined. In the end, the two of them forced me and Shen Tianlin out of the game. President Yi, really not going to raise any further. You and I both know the value of that land. I nodded. Don't worry, they won't have the last laugh. We'll choose the one in the northern part of the city. The northern part. It's all wilderness and mountains. It doesn't really fit with the commercial district. I smiled. The mountains there are warm in winter and cool in summer. As summers get hotter and winters colder, with increasingly extreme weather, more and more people will choose to get closer to nature. That piece of land is most suitable for developing tourism and turning it into a summer resort. When I got home, Uncle Lin was waiting for me in the living room. I allocated funds for you, didn't I? Did you intentionally give up that piece of land? There was a hint of darkness in his eyes, making it hard to guess what he was thinking. That piece of land is indeed excellent, with perfect development prospects and full commercial value. I even had someone check the feng shui, and it's practically a treasure. Since when did you start believing in this? He frowned, somewhat puzzled. But since it's so good, why are you giving it up? I smiled mysteriously. I couldn't just tell him outright that an ancient tomb would be unearthed on that land in a while. Uncle Lin, it's better to believe it than not, you'll see in a while. He sighed but still didn't say anything. I know you have your own ideas. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Your mother isn't in good health, and I hope you'll take on more responsibility soon so I can spend more time with her. I looked at him. Although Uncle Lin was quite scheming, he was genuinely good to my mother. Uncle Lin, I promise you that within 6 months, the Schumann group will be swallowed up. I smiled at him and said with confidence, sure enough, in the 4th month, ancient artifacts were unearthed from the land in the suburbs. All of Gusu's major business plans have to be called off, but Gusu and Shintenko refused. This was their entire life savings on the line. There was no other choice. The government had to order them to stop. During their illegal development, a large number of cultural relics were damaged. I smiled. The crime of damaging cultural relics is enough to make them suffer. The Schumann group had long been damaged at its foundation, and this time, pulling the rug out from under them directly caused this newly risen edifice to collapse. How did you know there was an ancient tomb underneath? I told you we had to check the feng shui, facing Uncle Lin's astonished gaze. I told him with a smile. Throughout history, everyone has loved locations with good feng shui, I said with a laugh, brushing it off lightly. Uncle Lin looked at me with suspicion, and after a long while, a glimmer of laughter appeared in his eyes as he reached out to pat my head. You did well, I was taken aback. After all these days of spending time together, he was beginning to learn how to be a father. Gusu was completely unable to get up this time, and Shintenko had endured enough hardship during this period. He wanted to return to the Shin family. How could Shin Tianlin let him have his way? Moreover, he had already offended all the prominent families in the capital and angered the loving Shin mother to the point of paralysis. With no other choice, he had no option but to linger at the Gu family. 2 men wanted to make a comeback, but they didn't have a single penny left, for 2 men who had been pampered since childhood. It was impossible for them to endure hardship from the bottom up, and Chen Mengyao didn't initially have the intention to endure hardship. Moreover, she had already grown accustomed to a life of wealth. She knew that being with a wealthy person, even if life wasn't respectable, would still be better than following a poor man. The 3 of them each had their own thoughts, sizing each other up. How could I let them have their way? If the roots are dark, how can a heart of light grow? Tell the debt collection agency to turn up the pressure a bit more. Didn't you want to stick by Chen Mengyao through thick and thin? Then you might as well get your fill of hardship. However, the reality is that no one actually wants to endure hardship. Shintenko became addicted to gambling. Gusu, desperate to make a comeback, took a huge risk and went to northern Myanmar, and Chen Mengyao, who initially seemed as resilient as a weed, chose to stay by the side of the wealthy by exchanging favors for financial support. Even the wealthy Shin family couldn't help but gasp in shock upon hearing about Shintenko's gambling debts. They abandoned any thought of helping Shintenko settle his affairs and chose instead to protect their own interests. Although Mr. Shin only has Shintenko and Shin Tianlin as his legitimate children, he actually has several illegitimate children, unfortunately. What a desperate Shintenko was capable of doing was beyond anyone's imagination. In the hospital, I held a bouquet of flowers as I went to visit Shin Tianlin. She sighed and said, I never thought that one day Shintenko would actually run into the Shin family with a knife and commit murder. Father was stabbed over a dozen times. I only suffered minor injuries because I helped him open the safe. But poor mother. I looked at her and said, in the end, you're the one who benefits from the fisherman's gain. A trace of sorrow flashed in her eyes. I don't want to end up like Chen Mengyao. My parents' favoritism is even more severe than you can imagine. Even the bond of blood cannot restrain human desires. I sighed. How could I not know? In my past life, wasn't I exactly the same, believing in blood ties, placing my hopes and affections on the wrong people? But I was luckier than her. I had a mother who loved me. I peeled the apple and handed it to her. Focus on getting better. I'll handle the rest. Actually, I didn't need to do anything more. Gusu and Chen Mengyao quickly brought about their own downfall. The place Gusu went to was extremely dangerous. I spent money to gather information and heard that on the first day, he tried to escape and had his legs broken because his performance didn't meet the standards. He could only be eliminated. Plus, with his arrogant young master temper, he could only be sent to feed the fish. As for Chen Mengyao, she turned her former attachment to her brother into hatred. Even when she received Gusu's distress call, she ignored it completely. She immediately turned and threw herself into the arms of her lover. But where could Chen Mengyao withstand the torment of these people? They were only after novelty. Moreover, living under such circumstances, it would be strange not to fall ill. The lotus, which rises unstained from the mud, ultimately decays with fame and fortune, joining the very filth it once transcended. It was another Mid-Autumn festival, and this year's evening banquet was jointly hosted by the Gu family, L Group, and the Shen family. Old Lou beamed as he held one exquisite craft after another, the wrinkles on his face seeming to smooth out. My girl, I always knew you were destined for great things. I looked over at old Lin and sweetly called out, Grandpa, over the years. Uncle Lin and my mother finally tied the knot. I just found out that the famous Elder Lin is actually Uncle Lin's father, and Elder Lou is not only a fan of Elder Lin but also his close friend. The story of how I once used the mooncakes he designed to raise donations reached Elder Lin's ears and earned his approval. I smiled, gazing at the full moon outside the window. The moonlight gently bathed the world, and my heart felt as bright as this moon. Come and cut the mooncakes. Shen Tian Lin and her mother waved at me from below the stage, and I walked toward them with a smile.